Go ahead and open in prayer. We'll get started. Heavenly Father, we thank you that throughout the ages you were faithful in giving us messengers to tell us your word, to write it down so that we can be edified and grow. Oh, Father, we're so desperately in need of it today. So many of us have challenges, personal challenges, health, finance, jobs, family relations, and our church has challenges as we reach out and try to enlarge our ministry and touch as many people as we can for Christ. Our nation is in trouble. We need your message, and we thank you that we have it written down so abundantly, and we pray that as we study it this morning, you will open our minds and our hearts and change us and challenge us and tear us apart with the truth of your word so that we can grow and understand where you're headed with your program of salvation. And we ask these things in the name of our hero, our high priest and king, Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, Malachi chapter 2. We made it into the second chapter before the end of the semester. That's awesome. So, we're doing good. So, in the beginning, in the first chapter, as you recall, Malachi, whose name in Hebrew means what? Yeah, that's important to remember for today because there's a cool little paradox here that we'll look at as we go. So he's been talking about the people in general and how they've been profaning the name of God. And now, beginning in chapter 2, he now turns his attention directly to the priesthood, to the Levitical priesthood of Israel. And so let's just read through this, and here's what he has to say. And now this admonition is for you, O priests. If you do not listen, and if you do not set your heart to honor my name, says the Lord Almighty, I will send a curse upon you, and I will curse your blessings. Yes, I have already cursed them, because you have not set your heart to honor me. Because of you, I will rebuke your descendants. I will spread on your faces the offal of your festival sacrifices, and you will be carried off with it. And you will know that I have sent you this admonition so that my covenant with Levi may continue, says the Lord Almighty. My covenant was with him, a covenant of life and peace, and I gave them to him. This called for reverence, and he revered me and stood in awe of my name. True instruction was in his mouth, and nothing false was found on his lips. He walked with me in peace and uprightness, and turned many from sin. For the lips of a priest ought to preserve knowledge, and from his mouth men should seek instruction, because he is the messenger of the Lord Almighty. But you have turned from the way, and by your teaching have caused many to stumble. You have violated the covenant with Levi, says the Lord Almighty, so I have caused you to be despised and humiliated before all the people, because you have not followed my ways, but have shown partiality in matters of the law. Now, I don't know if you noticed the little paradox there in verse 7. Keep in mind, in verse 7, Malachi, the non-priest prophet, okay, he's not a priest, but he's a prophet, Malachi, and he says this, from the lips of a priest ought to preserve knowledge, and from his mouth men should seek instruction, because he, that is the priest, is the messenger. And what does that sound like in Hebrew? Malachi. You're supposed to be the Malachi of the Lord Almighty. But instead, here I am, Malachi, the Lord's messenger, a non-priest, instructing you. Now, what does that illustrate? Yeah. It means that the priesthood has become dysfunctional to the point that God has sent somebody from outside the priesthood to deal with the priesthood and get them back in line. So Malachi the messenger is telling them, you should be the Malachi, but instead I am. Okay, so, all right, so pretty harsh words dealing with the Levitical priesthood, and I want to make sure that we understand kind of the background of the Levitical priesthood. What does the scripture say about them? What are their duties and responsibilities? And when it's all said and done, who cares? Why does this matter to us? Why does it matter to us? Because, this is just talking about the Levitical priesthood. We're not Levitical priests. We're not in the age of Israel. We're not under the law of Moses. So why do we care? Any thoughts?
There's a real parallel with the priesthood in the church today.
Exactly. That's right. And who are the priests in the church today? Leaders? Anyone else?
Believers.
Yeah, it is a universal priesthood in the church. All believers in Christ, whatever age you are saved, all the way until you die, you are a priest, and not just a priest, you're a royal priest, says the Bible, says 1 Peter 2. A royal priesthood. The Levitical priesthood was not royal. They were non-royal. They had no connection with royalty. But the church age priesthood is a royal priesthood after the order of Melchizedek, in line with Christ's own priesthood. So there is a parallel here, and we will connect those dots by the time we get through this, and to understand that the same admonition that is vectored toward the Levitical priesthood, many parts of it can also be applicable to the royal priesthood of the church age. So let's understand the Levitical priesthood, where it came from, what it's all about, and then let's understand the royal priesthood and what that's all about, and see where they're alike and where they're different. So we start, of course, with Jacob, whose name is changed to Israel, and he has the 12 sons who become the 12 tribes of Israel. But the one that we're interested in today is Levi, whose name is talked about here in Malachi chapter 2. And just to kind of remind you, Levi has 3 sons, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Whoops, spelled that wrong. Merari. And each of these 3 comprise what we call the Levites. They are the Levites because they come from the tribe of Levi. All of these Levites are special and holy to the Lord. They are all 3 of them not permitted to own property in the land of Israel. They have no inheritance in the land. Their inheritance is the Lord. That's their part. That's their share. So they're all Levites. But of the Levites, Kohath, his family is going to inherit even a more special privilege, because Kohath, his son is Amram, and Amram's famous 2 sons, Moses and Moses' brother Aaron, who is the first high priest of Israel. And then Aaron, of course, has 4 sons, from which eventually the priesthood will descend. So it's the sons of Aaron become the priests within the tribe of Levi, within the Levites. Aaron's sons have the priesthood, and they're called a Levitical priesthood. Okay, so you'll see this term, Levitical priesthood, meaning, of course, that it's the priesthood that came from the tribe of Levi. We also will frequently call it the Aaronic priesthood, because, of course, it descends from the first high priest, Aaron. Okay? Now, that's where they come from. One thing that should be manifestly obvious to you is that there is a qualification for Levitical priesthood that is of insurmountable importance. And what is that? What's the most important factor about you that will decide whether you qualify for the Levitical priesthood?
Genealogy.
Genealogy. That's the key. It is a genealogical... I can never spell this word. There. Genealogy. It is a genealogical priesthood. It's all about your birth. It's all about your birth. If you are not from the tribe of Levi, you cannot be a priest. If you are not from the family of Aaron, you cannot be a priest. Okay? Obviously, there are other qualifications, which are... What else do you have to be to qualify for the Aaronic priesthood?
Age.
Pardon?
Age.
Okay, your age. So your age, when you come of age, you can become the priest and fully function as one.
Gender.
What else? Gender. Okay, so you have to be a male. Only men are allowed in this priesthood. What else?
Without blemish.
Yeah, you have to be. You cannot be disabled, so you have to be without blemish, which means without physical disability. Question: do you have to be a believer in God? No, you don't. That's not part of the qualification, strangely enough. And there are examples in the Bible, in the Old Testament, of priests who were not believers. At least as far as we can tell, they were not believers. Some of them were quite criminal. They were scoundrels. Can you name any?
Eli's sons.
Yeah, Eli's sons, and who were they? Othni and Phinehas, yeah, two thugs. They were just basically thugs. They ran the temple as if it was a brothel. They were basically gangsters, and they just had no regard whatsoever for the law. They had no regard for the priesthood. They were clearly not believers, but they were priests, fully qualified priests. Okay. Now, just real quick, as we think about this is the Levitical priesthood. How do these things stack up with regard to the royal priesthood of the church? Is genealogy an issue? Is your birth an issue?
Yes.
Elucidate.
New birth.
Your new birth. So Levi is concerned with your birth, but the royal priesthood is all about rebirth. Okay, that's a big difference. Okay, one is a physical birth, the other one is a spiritual birth. Okay, what else? What about the age requirements?
Understanding.
Yeah, I think it would be fair to say the age of accountability, the age of God consciousness, but we don't really know what that is because it's different probably for each person. But yeah, I think that's a fair way of saying it. An age of understanding, so we reject things like infant baptism and that sort of thing because it doesn't really mean anything. Okay, what about gender? Women are allowed in the priesthood? Oh, I don't approve of that. I'm sorry. But I'm not in charge, so it doesn't matter whether I approve of it. God is in charge, and I do approve of it, of course. I'm just kidding. But since my wife is not here today, she's not feeling well, I could get away with that. So, but no, there are no gender requirements. Men and women serve in the priesthood. Jesus Christ is the greatest liberator of women in human history. He liberates all human beings. And this is an example of it. It's a universal priesthood. What about racial requirements? Do you have to be from the tribe of Levi? Do you have to be from Jacob? Do you have to be from Abraham? No. It is open to all races, all nations. It's a universal priesthood in that regard. What about physical disability? Is that a problem in the royal priesthood? No, not at all. Because we know that this was about shadow Christology, and the shadows have been fulfilled in the person of Christ. So there is no longer any place for that. So again, it's quite a different priesthood. The requirements are different, but both of them are genuine priests. Now, what were the duties of the Levitical priesthood? What did they have to do? Actually, before we talk about that, let's talk about one of our favorite subjects, which I'm sure I will get in trouble with teaching here now, but I don't particularly care. We'll deal with it. Let's talk about tithing. Tithing. What is tithing? Where does it come from? What is it about?
Providing for the Levites.
Say again?
Providing for the Levites.
Okay, provides for the Levites. That's a good thing to know. That tithing is intended to logistically sustain the Levites. So tithing in the law of Moses is an income tax. It's basically an income tax on the rest of Israel. A 10% tax. They take 10%, the best 10% off the top, and they deliver it to whom? By law. They deliver it to whom? Yeah, well, actually they deliver it to Levites. They have to deliver it to Levites. The Levites are the only ones who are permitted to accept the tithe, according to the law. Now, what about the Levites? Do they tithe?
Yes.
Yes, they do. And to whom do they tithe?
The priest.
They tithe to the priests. Okay, and again, they take it off the top of what they get, and they deliver it to the priests to logistically sustain the priests. What about the priests? Do they tithe?
Yes.
I hear yes. Actually, this is the one class of Israelite that does not tithe. Okay, now they do, as part of their normal sacrifice, the ritual system, they of course burn things on the altar, they give things to the Lord that way, but it's not a tithe. They receive the tithe, they don't give the tithe. Okay, they are essentially tax exempt. Okay, in that regard. So this is the tithe system intended as an income tax to sustain the Levites in general because they have no inheritance in the land, and to sustain the priesthood. Now, that part isn't controversial. Let's talk about New Testament tithing. What is that all about? I would never do this, but I'd love to do it. I would love to ask how many people tithe, okay, in here. So don't raise your hand, okay? Because we hear about this all the time. I mean, everywhere I go, people are tithing. When I go to teach at the prison, the prisoners are tithing. And I sit there and scratch my chin and I think, okay, now according to the law, you have to deliver that tithe to a Levite. So how many of you are delivering your tithes to Levites? Because that's what the Bible says to do. You know, is tithing a New Testament concept? The answer is no. There is no tithing in the New Testament. Now, if you immediately protest, wait a minute, it's in the Gospels. Yeah, it is in the Gospels. The Gospels are not New Testament books. They're Old Testament books. They're because the New Testament hasn't begun until the death of Christ. That's why remember at the Last Supper, he holds up the cup and he says, this cup is what? The new covenant in my blood. In other words, what he's signaling there is, when I die and shed blood, that will inaugurate the new covenant, hence the New Testament. Okay, so when you read about tithing in the Gospels, it's of course you would. That's naturally you read a lot about the law of Moses in the Gospels because that was fundamental to Christ's ministry. But the idea of tithing itself is a compulsory income tax on ancient Israel. It's part of the ancient Israel's constitution. Now, the reason I even bring this up, and I talk about this at all, is because New Testament giving is utterly different than the tithe system. New Testament giving, according to the book of 2 Corinthians, is without compulsion. It's giving as an expression of your spiritual growth as a believer in Christ, as an expression of gratitude for what you have. It's an expression of your maturity. Okay, and it's not compulsive. It is not to be coerced. That's different from the tithe. The tithe is by law. You must do these things. It's a violation of the law if you do not. Okay, so it's a big difference. Now, when you stop and think about it, let's think about the average Christian living in America today. He pays income tax to the federal government at what rate, roughly? 20 to 30%, maybe more or less. 20 to 30% off the top income tax. Then he pays what other kinds of taxes? State tax.
Virginia.
Yeah, right. In different states, there's maybe municipal taxes, there's sales taxes, there's inheritance taxes, there's taxes.
It's a dog tax.
A dog tax, yeah. Well, that's why I have cats. It's my freedom from the government. Yeah. So I mean, there's taxes everywhere. You're being taxed at an enormous rate, historically, an enormous rate, way overtaxed, way more than you should be. Then along comes the church and tells you, by the way, back up, take 10% off the top. That becomes another income tax that you have to pay to the church. Now, in my view, as a believer in Christ, that offends me. One, it is too oppressive on people, number one. Number two, it's not biblical. There's nothing in the New Testament that suggests we should do that. And number three, I know the history of why we do that. Okay, and why do we do that? Why is it that good evangelical, born-again believers who are in good Bible-teaching churches, they know that we're not under the law of Moses? Man, it's so clearly declared in the Scripture. Book of Galatians, book of Colossians, Hebrews, it all says that. But we take little pieces of the law of Moses, like tithing, and pull them kicking and screaming into the church age. Why? Why do we do that? Why has the church done that for 2,000 years, do you think?
To provide for the needs of the pastoral stuff.
To provide for the needs of the pastors, maybe. What else? Yeah.
Because we don't know what we think we know.
Yeah, one is a lack of teaching, okay, is always a problem, okay? And there are more nefarious reasons historically.
To care for the poor?
Oh, that's nice, but that's not nefarious. Yeah, to care for the poor, which okay, that's fair because some people do that with their tithes. Some churches do that with tithes.
Was it Catholicism?
Yeah, because Roman Catholicism, starting in the 4th century, well, actually before the 4th century, but in the 4th century, it became an industry, began to build huge, gorgeous, beautiful cathedrals. And they began to get promoted from the persecuted bishop of a local community of believers who didn't even have a building to meet in to becoming the bishop of Augsburg, and all kinds of, these big political offices there under Constantine and Theodosius and Justinian and these newly converted, Christian Roman emperors. All of a sudden, church officials are now political leaders. And absolute power corrupts absolutely, as it corrupted the church. And so now you have all these officials, and they want money. And so what do? They dig into the Bible, and they pull something out of the law of Moses called tithing that has no application whatsoever to a New Testament believer, and inflicts it on the church and makes it mandatory. Okay, and so they have their income, and we have a whole lot of bad doctrine being taught over thousands of years. Okay, to church age believers. Yeah.
Didn't Paul in Ephesians ask for? Wasn't there something about a prophet who said that there's going to be a time of turmoil in Jerusalem, and that they started giving money
Sure.
to take to... And
it was always a goodwill, voluntary offering.
Right.
And Paul even went so far as to kind of play a game with the churches that he was ministering to, and began to say, this church was given a whole lot of money, how are you guys doing, kind of thing. So he was sort of pitting the churches off one another. But again, it was an appeal to volition. It was not a mandatory income tax. Okay, and so it's so there's a difference there. I'm not going to go on and on about that. Now, someone will run off to the pastor and say, "Hey, look, Bob Leonard says we should tithe." Well, they already know where I stand on that. So I'm just teaching what the Scripture says. I'm not making it up. I have no ulterior motives. But I want you to know that's not a scriptural idea. So beware. You as a royal priest, first of all, you're a priest. Priests are the only ones who don't pay tithes. Okay? So, and the same thing with the Levitical priesthood. And with regard to the New Testament, your giving is far more important and profound than the Old Testament tithe, because everyone paid tithes, whether you were spiritual or not, whether you believed in God or not. If you were a citizen of Israel, you pay tithes. That's it. But the New Testament believer pays out of his or her maturity, out of his or her gratitude and love for God and love for fellow believers. That's far more profound than any income tax inflicted upon you. So that's why I bring that up. All right, back to the duties here. What are the duties of the Levitical priesthood? What do they do?
Care for the tabernacle.
Okay, so they care for the tabernacle and later the temple. And just to kind of drill down on this a little bit, the Levites have a piece of this too. So, for example, the Gershonites deal with the curtains. Okay, they're the ones that carry the curtains and the tents. The Kohathites carry the furnishings of the tabernacle. They carry the golden lampstand, the golden table of shewbread, the golden altar of incense, the bronze altar, the bronze laver, and the Ark of the Covenant. But the Kohathites do not touch those articles. They do not touch those articles until they're covered with cloth. And who covers them? The priests cover them, okay? Not the Kohathites. So the Kohathites carry them after they're covered. And then the Merarites they carry basically the tent pegs and the ropes and things like that. So all the Levites have their own duty with regard to moving the tabernacle around. Okay? And they all have a piece of administering that. But the priesthood in particular administer the tabernacle and later the temple. Now, along with that, then we have, as part of that, a teaching ministry. Okay, what are they teaching? If they're good priests, what are they teaching? I like that. One is they're teaching the law, the Torah. Okay, that's true. And then as a part of the Torah teaching, there's a part of the Torah teaching that is manifested within the tabernacle rituals. And what do we call that category of doctrine?
Christology.
Huh?
Is it Christology?
Yeah, that's right. Shadow, what we call, or at least what the New Testament calls, shadow Christology. It doesn't use the word Christology, but it uses the word shadow. Shadow Christology. What is shadow Christology? Just in your own words. Shadow Christology, yeah.
It's an Old Testament picture that shows what Messiah will be and will do when he comes.
Well said. That's it. It's a picture from the Old Testament of the coming Messiah, his person, his work, what he is going to do. It is the thing that makes the rituals within the tabernacle meaningful, because otherwise you're just slaughtering animals like any pagan would do. But in this case, if you have a good teaching priesthood, they're teaching you as you go. You bring the bull or the ewe or whatever it is. You bring the bull to the bronze altar, and the priest first inspects the animal. What is he inspecting for?
Blemish.
Why? What is he teaching as he's inspecting for blemish? Yeah, he's teaching the impeccability of Jesus Christ. He's teaching the fact that God is going to provide his own sacrifice. Not an animal like this, but something far more profound and far more efficacious for the atonement of sin. And when that happens, the sacrifice will be perfect. It will be absolutely impeccable. And so that's why we're going to inspect the animal for blemish. And then he's going to tell you, as you bring this animal, he's going to tell you, now take your hand, your right hand, put it on the head of the animal. Why? What is he teaching?
Transference.
Transference, what's another word for that? Begins with I. Imputing. And the imputation of sin. He's teaching you, we're not going to take your sin that you have committed and you admit that you have sinned in this way. We're going to impute those sins onto the animal. We're going to blame this innocent animal for your sin as a preliminary step to executing that animal for the sin. Okay? So he's teaching imputation. Then he takes the animal, ties the animal down on the horns of the altar, and slits its throat. Blood pumps out. The animal convulses as it's dying in front of you. And you stand there and watch that. Why?
You deserve to die.
Yeah, it's to make, it's an appeal to your emotions and your spirit. This animal died because of me. This animal became my substitute as a foreshadowing of a far greater substitutionary program that is coming in Christ. That's the idea. So that's what they have to teach. If they're good priests, if they're bad priests or mediocre priests, they just step through the rituals, they're not careful about it, and they're not teaching. This is the condition of Malachi, the book of Malachi. This is the priesthood has languished and become not interested in shadow Christology, and so they're just going through the motions. And of course, there's lots of other shadow Christology associated with the temple. When the priest first comes up to take your animal, even before he touches the animal or talks to you, he does one thing before he does any of that. And what's that?
Washes his hands.
He washes his hands and feet in the bronze laver, which is also outside the temple or outside the tabernacle. He washes his hands and feet. It's a ceremonial, ritualistic washing. Why? What is he teaching? What is he teaching when he does that? Oh, I'm wounded. Say again?
Just cleansing.
Yeah, it's a cleansing, and it's a specific kind of cleansing. It's a cleansing in the believer's life. Okay, it's what the priest, as the representative believer, does every day. He does it before he can be of service to God. He washes himself and he doesn't wash his whole body. He just washes his hands and his feet, which may have come into contact with something sinful. Now, what does that teach? It teaches the biblical concept of confession of sin. Confession of sin. It teaches that you and I, as believers in Christ, by the way, this does not apply to unbelievers. There's nothing to do with unbelievers. It's for believers only. Believers wash in the bronze laver, so to speak. Every day we confess our sin to the Lord. Before we can serve the Lord, we have to confess our sin. Otherwise, the service is meaningless.
I've just recently started going mentally in my mind in my prayer time, first to the labor.
Yeah, that's good.
So
It's a
that
good
then
practice.
I cannot have anything between God and I.
Yeah, that's a
before I
good
give
practice.
adoration.
I agree. That's what I do as well. And it's, because that's the touchstone of grace there. It's we come to the Lord, admit our failures, and we benefit from that grace. The Bible teaches this in really cool ways and in very subtle ways. One of the things that's really cool about shadow Christology, I found this one time in the Bible, and it blew me away. How tightly integrated shadow Christology is in the Bible. So, we're talking about the bronze laver, right? A picture of confession. Now, in the New Testament, when Paul is talking about confession of sin, one of the metaphors that he uses for it is, he says to the Corinthian believers, therefore you should examine yourselves before you take communion. What he means by that is, look at your life, look for sin. If you see sin, confess it. So he calls it self-examination, right? Now, go back to the Old Testament, book of Exodus, and you find an interesting little fact about how they made the bronze laver. What they made it out of. Do you know what they made it out of?
Women's mirrors.
They made it out of mirrors. The mirrors that the women took out of Egypt when they left. Man, I think that's so cool. You know, they take mirrors, self-examination, and make a bronze laver for spiritual self-examination. Okay, so that's an example of the shadow Christology of the Old Testament. And then, you know, as you move into the tabernacle itself, you walk in and you see the golden lampstand. We won't go through every detail, but the golden lampstand is a foreshadowing of Christ as the light of the world. You look over on the other side to the right, you see the golden table of shewbread, a picture of Christ as the bread of life. You go forward and you see this big scary curtain in front of you. And what is on the scary curtain? Why is it scary?
A cute little cupid.
A cute little cupid, yeah. Yeah, as Joel well knows. It's not a cupid, although it's often portrayed that way, which is a shame. It's not a cupid, it's an angel, and it's a terrifying killer angel. It's intended to scare the hell out of you, actually, when you look at it, because it has a message on that curtain. Stay out, you are not welcome. The living God, the consuming fire is behind this curtain. If you step behind here, you're dead. That's what it means. That's what that angel means. And the priest knew that. It was terrifying. Now, right in front of that angel, right in front of the curtain, is another altar. But it's a small one. It's a golden altar now. And it's not intended to execute animals. It's intended to burn incense. And the incense is a picture of what? It is a picture of prayer. That's declared many times over in the Bible. It's the prayers. And it's natural that it would be right there in front of the curtain because you're praying to the entity right on the other side. In fact, very often the golden altar in the book of Hebrews is associated with being in the holy place. It's not actually physically in the holy place, but it's the connection into the holy place. So they burn incense there. And then, of course, there's the curtain. And behind the curtain, if you were brave enough to go in there once a year on the Day of Atonement and you happen to be the high priest of Israel, what do you see? What's the final piece of furniture?
Ark.
The golden Ark of the Covenant, made of two items, gold and acacia wood. Why is it made of two items? What is that? What shadow Christology is that teaching? Gold and acacia. That's right. It's teaching the hypostatic union of Christ. Jesus Christ is true humanity, wood, and undiminished deity, gold, together in one body forever. That's Christ. And then within the Ark of the Covenant, we have these three examples of sin: the manna, Korah's, the rod that budded, and the tables of the law. These are pictures of sin. Two angels, killer angels, on top of the box looking in to condemn that sin, but they don't see it because the sin is covered by the seat of propitiation, which has blood stains on it once a year from the Day of Atonement. This is all shadow Christology. Teaches all the various aspects of what Christ accomplished on our behalf on the cross. So that's what these guys need to be masters of. And of course, when you get to Malachi, they're not masters of it. They just don't care. It's not important to them. They've lost their accuracy, they've lost their conviction, they've lost their connection to the Torah, so they're just stepping through the motions, and they're not even doing that very well. Okay, and that's why he's after them. Now, Malachi makes this point on behalf of the Lord that the Lord made a covenant with Levi. What covenant is in view exactly? What are we talking about there? Any ideas?
The one with Phineas, or Phineas?
Well, you go right to the head of the class. We'll get to Phineas in a minute, because that is a cool story. But let's start in Deuteronomy 33. Back to Deuteronomy 33. We'll start in verse 8, and this is Moses blessing the tribes, and he gets over to Levi in verse 8. So this is Deuteronomy 33, verse 8. And he says this, about Levi, he said, your Thummim and Urim belong to the man you favored. Now what is the Thummim and Urim?
Two stones that go inside.
Yeah, that's right. They're two stones. Thummim is a Hebrew word. It's actually a plural Hebrew word that means perfections. Urim is a Hebrew word that means lights. So the lights and perfections, stones, would go into the breastpiece of the high priest, and he could basically consult those when he's looking for a yes or no answer from the Lord. Okay, he could say, should we go and attack the Amalekites? And then he pulls out one of these, and it's the answer yes, or it's the answer no, kind of thing. It's a way of figuring out what the Lord wants the people to do. So, Thummim and Urim belong to the man you favored. You tested him at Massah. You contended with him at the waters of Meribah. Now, question, and this is important that you understand this. Massah and Meribah. What happened at those places? It's actually two names for the same place. In fact, this is a place that actually has three names, okay? Because it's originally called Rephidim, which is Hebrew for the place of rest. But it gains a new name, Massah and Meribah, because of what happened there, okay? And so what happened there? When the children of Israel, during the Exodus, they got around to Rephidim, the place of rest, and what happened?
Wasn't that Korah's rebellion?
No, it wasn't Korah's rebellion. That's later. That's later. But it's, say again? No, it's not the golden calves. That's also later. But you've actually hit, two of the really important items that are in the Ark of the Covenant. But it's actually before all that. Yeah.
When Moses struck the rock.
Yeah. So what happens is they get to Rephidim and the children of Israel start whining. They start complaining. And what is the Hebrew word for complaining? Meribah. Okay, that's why this place is going to be called Meribah, because they're complaining. And what they're complaining about is they're saying, we don't have any water, we don't have any food, we like Egypt better, we want to go back to Egypt, why'd you bring us out here to kill us, you hate us, that's the kind of stuff they're doing. And, that's amusing until you realize that what they're doing is attacking the character of God. God did not bring them out to kill them, God brought them out to birth the nation of Israel, to displace the Canaanites out of Palestine, and to do a remarkable work of salvation. So when they're complaining ultimately against God. So Moses, now here's the thing I want you to notice. In Deuteronomy 33, Moses is talking about whom? In verse 8, he's blessing whom? Levi. Now where is Levi at this moment as Moses is blessing him?
He's dead.
He's dead. He's not there. He's dead. Levi is not the guy actually being talked about. It's the descendants of Levi. Okay, did you get that? That's who's really at issue. The descendants of Levi. Levi is long dead by this time. Okay, and so when it's talking about what Levi did, quote unquote, what Levi did at Massah and Meribah, who actually did these things? Which descendants of Levi actually were the heroes at Meribah?
Moses and Aaron.
Moses and Aaron. Moses and Aaron were the ones that were there. Okay, so that's what's actually being talked about. They were tested there and they did well. So here's what happened. Children of Israel are whining, we want water, what are we going to do? We hate you, take us back to Egypt. And Moses says, Lord, I'm so tired of these knuckleheads, what am I going to do? And the Lord said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a rod, the same rod that you used to judge the Nile River. So, did you get this? It's a rod of judgment. It's a rod of judgment, okay? He said, we're going to take that rod of judgment and we're going to strike the rock. And when we strike the rock, living water will come out. What is that a picture of? Is that just some cool magic trick that Yahweh Sabaoth decided to do? No, there's a point to it. What is the point? Yeah, it's a picture of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Strike the rock with judgment. It's the rod of judgment striking the Messiah. And living water comes out and saves the nation. Okay, that's the picture right there. And by the way, later on in Moses' life, the reason he doesn't go into the promised land, Moses blew it as an old man. He blew it, dropped the ball, really bad. Why? Because many years later, almost 40 years later, again they need water. Moses is crying out to the Lord, and the Lord says to Moses to do what? Speak to the rock. And it's a different rock. It's a different kind of word in Hebrew. Because the first rock is just like a crag, it's just there. The other one is specifically an elevated rock, is what that means in Hebrew, an elevated rock. Why is the rock elevated now? What is that picture? What's that a picture of?
Resurrected.
The resurrected Christ now. Okay, he's not the humble carpenter's son naked on the cross. Now he's the elevated rock. And what does Moses do?
Strikes it with a rock.
He gets in front of the people of Israel. Am I going to have to provide water for you one more time? Well, you can tell right off the bat, he's not where he should be spiritually. Am I going to have to provide water for you again? And then he takes the rod of judgment and strikes the elevated rock. And wrong move. That just cost you the promised land there, bud. Because you do not strike, we do not crucify the elevated Christ, the resurrected Christ. We speak to him and water comes out. So this was his, so what happened? Moses dropped the ball on shadow Christology. He forgot. This isn't a magic trick. This is a teaching. This is Bible class. I'm teaching Bible class when I do this. I'm not doing magic tricks. And he mistaught. He mistaught terribly. Yeah.
So it wasn't just an issue with disobedience or pride or arrogance. It was an issue with the different circumstances of the rock.
Yes. And Moses knew this. It was, and this is why the Lord used two different words to describe the rocks, to make it very clear. This is a different situation.
So the striking was with the judgment,
Yes.
which was his crucifixion.
First advent, cross. The second advent, when Christ comes back elevated, glorious, not coming back to die. This time he's coming back to judge and make war and to rule. And so we don't strike against that.
So he would have known that because of the original language.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, he would certainly have known it. If his heart had been open to it, he would have understood and he would have obeyed the Lord, carefully obeyed the Lord. The Lord does not play around with instruments of shadow Christology. The Bible specifically says in the law of Moses, when you make these furnishings, you make them exactly as I tell you to make them. Exactly. There is no room for innovation. You do exactly what I tell you when you make the ark, when you make the candlestick, when you do these things. It's exactly the way I tell you to. Why? Because they are very precise for a reason. Because I'm going to teach you very precise doctrine. Okay, so that when the Christ actually comes, you'll be able to have a greater appreciation for what he is and what he's doing. Okay, that's why this must be carefully protected, this shadow Christology. And when you teach it wrong, you're going to suffer for it, because this doctrine is precious to the Lord, and it should be precious to you as a priesthood. Okay, that's
Would
it.
that be the same as now this side of the cross, if we're condemning him or striking at him with our...
Yeah, it's well said, and I'm glad you're doing it. It's exactly what we need to do is connect the dots. What does it mean to us today in the church age? And it's, as you're saying, it's very applicable to us in the church age. Jane?
Scripture comes to mind, let not many of you be teachers, for there's a stricter judgment
Yeah.
for those things.
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. And there he's talking about the office and spiritual gift of teaching. However, and there's a big however, everyone who's a believer in Christ is a priest. And every priest has a piece of teaching. As we see in Malachi here. What did Malachi say? The lips of the priest should be teaching. He should be turning people away from sin, turning people toward the Lord. The priest should be a master of the doctrines in the Bible. Okay, so if you are a believer in Jesus Christ, you are a royal priest, not just a Levitical priest, but a royal priest. You and I have an immense obligation to know the Scriptures. Now, we don't know them instantly the moment we're saved. We don't know anything the moment we're saved. We're spiritual infants. But we get into a church that has a good teaching function, and we learn, and we study, and we study with an open heart, and we study with an obedient heart, and we minister while we're learning. We go out and minister to other believers. We evangelize the world as best we can. And so we're doing, and we're growing, and we're learning. We're growing in grace, as Peter said. We're growing in grace and in the knowledge of the Lord Jesus. Okay, that's what we need to do. So that, to some degree, all of us are teachers. We can help teach each other. We can help teach unbelievers. We can teach our families about the nature of God and his program of salvation. And this is what the Levitical priesthood has failed to do. This is what very often the church fails to do. Now, how could you, just to go down a rabbit trail for a second, Moses strikes the elevated rock. Totally inappropriate. It's just totally inappropriate to do that. How could you do a similar thing in the age of the church? What do you think?
by saying that Christ has to be crucified again and again for your sins.
Okay,
rather than-
yeah, that may be one way. Yep. Any other way that you've seen or observed?
By judging God's character when things go wrong in my life.
Yeah, that's so impugning God's character, perhaps blaming God for something that your own bad personal decisions led to, or blaming or saying that God doesn't love me, or God hates me because this or that circumstance occurs. Yeah, I agree with that. Go ahead.
In the sense of misunderstanding context,
Yeah.
Continuing to point to and look for a unique and mild and soft and cuddly Christ.
You knocked it out of the park. That's exactly what I was thinking of. And we do this all the time in the age of the church. And it's so bizarre and ironic when you think about it. We know that God's program of, associated with Christ is going to unfold in two separate ways. First Advent and the second Advent. Okay, so this is declared in the Old Testament, declared by the prophets, right? There's going to be a suffering servant phase. He's crushed for our iniquities, wounded for our transgression. Then there's going to be a glorious political, military, rule the world phase, right? Okay, so 2,000 years ago, Jesus Christ shows up. It's actually the first Advent of Christ, but what are the Jews looking for? Second Advent. They want the second Advent. And they make that really clear. They push the crown at him constantly. And Satan pushes the crown at him constantly. And he keeps saying, no, 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 no. And finally he grabs Peter by the throat, basically, and says, get behind me, Satan. Okay, I'm not going to do that. Because if I do that, you're dead. You won't qualify for that kingdom. So no, this is not the second Advent. This is the first Advent. And I'm going to go to the cross and suffer death. Okay, now, so here you have the whole Jewish nation during the first Advent looking for a second Advent Jesus. Okay, what knuckleheads, right? Now let's go forward 2,000 years. It's the age of the church. We're anticipating the second Advent of Jesus Christ. And how do we describe the Lord that is coming?
God is love.
God is love, the humble carpenter's son. We draw pictures of him with a big smile, getting ready to hug the world, hand out lollipops, huh?
Judge not.
Judge not. We misquote words out of context there, saying, oh, he's not about judgment. He's this humble carpenter's son coming. Well, if that's what you're looking for the second Advent, you're in for a rude surprise, brothers and sisters, because that is not the way it's going to be. He is coming back in glory to judge and make war. It is going to be a catastrophe for the world. Billions of people will die as a consequence of the second Advent. If you don't like that, tough. It doesn't matter what you like. That is what the Scripture says. That's what's going to happen. He is coming back in glory to judge, make war, and rule. Not be the humble carpenter's son. Now, the Lord is loving and gracious. In fact, as a king, he is going to be a king characterized by grace and mercy and love and joy, but also of justice and righteousness and strength, omnipotence. Okay? Nobody can stand up to him when he is the king. So we have this misunderstanding of first and second Advent. So you want to know how we can be guilty of the same thing Moses did? We do it all the time. We do it all the time because we give a false picture of Christ to the world. Okay, and that's we're supposed to do better than that because we're priests. Okay. Okay, so there's a teaching ministry associated with this, and just to continue in Deuteronomy 33 for a second. You tested him at Massah. You contended with him at the waters of Meribah. Now notice this, verse 9, and this is a beautiful verse. Now he's talking about Levi, but more specifically he's talking about Moses and Aaron. He said of his father and mother, I have no regard for them. He did not recognize his brothers or acknowledge his own children, but he watched over your word and guarded your covenant. What a beautiful verse. Does that remind you of anything in Scripture? Does that remind you of another passage in Scripture that says some shocking things about your family? What did Jesus say to his disciples? Huh?
Hate your...
Yeah. If you don't hate your mother and father, you're not worthy of me. What? And he's saying this to a nation who is all about genealogy and all about family lines. And he says it in a deliberately provocative way. I mean, that's the way the Lord operates. He deliberately provokes people with what he's saying to shock them into reality. And of course, he doesn't mean he wants you to hate your mother and father. Of course, that's not what he means. What he means is,
Love them less.
yeah, it means that you're supposed to have a value system that is centered and rooted on what? On Christ and on his word. And so what he's saying here is, he's saying, he said, and he's actually talking about himself, Moses and Aaron, he said of his father and mother, I have no regard for them. Now, what that means is, I have no regard for them with, relative to the word, relative to the covenant. That is my most important calling. Okay, and so I have no regard for them. He did not recognize his brothers or acknowledge his own children, but he watched over your word and guarded your covenant. That's the standard for the priesthood. And I sometimes ask myself, and I hope you ask yourself, am I up to that standard? Is that really where I'm at? That I guard the covenant and the word of God in front of an unbelieving world, in front of a lackadaisical and misinformed church? Is that where I stand? Is that what I'm about? Okay, that is a very high standard. And a beautiful illustration of the priesthood. Verse 10, he teaches, there you go, the teaching function. He teaches your precepts to Jacob and your law to Israel. He offers incense before you, reference to prayer, and whole burnt offerings on your altar. Bless all his skills, O Lord, and be pleased with the work of his hands. Smite the loins of those who rise up against him. Strike his foes till they rise no more. Okay, now that's an example of the covenant of peace and life that God gave to Levi. If you want some, let's look at a couple others. Exodus 32. Exodus 32. And we'll look at verses 25 and following. And this is, of course, the golden calf incident, which leads to catastrophe for Israel and leads to the remaking of the law after Moses smashes it. Verse 25, Moses saw that the people were running wild and that Aaron had let them get out of control and so became a laughingstock to their enemies. So he stood at the entrance to the camp and said, whoever is for the Lord, come to me. And the Levites rallied to him. Then he said to them, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Each man strap a sword to his side. Go back and forth throughout the camp from one end to the other, each killing his brother and friend and neighbor. The Levites did as Moses commanded, and that day about 3,000 of the people died. Then Moses said, you have been set apart to the Lord today, for you were against your own sons and brothers, and he has blessed you this day. Now, how do you feel about that?
Pretty tough.
Yeah, it's a really tough standard. It's a shockingly tough standard that we're called to. Now, obviously, I don't think that what the Lord has in mind is for us to go out and murder our siblings and our family members. But the idea there is to illustrate, when it comes down to it, you better be willing to leave your family behind if that is required to follow Christ. Yeah, please.
That bothers me a little bit.
Okay.
And one reason is that Levi, two of his sons, became wicked, and he didn't correct them. He was neglecting his duty as a father. And even Samuel's kids didn't turn out that well.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that our families, we are supposed to, husbands are supposed to love their wives and care for them as Christ loved the church.
Yeah.
And children are supposed to instruct their parents from the time, parents are supposed to instruct their
No,
children.
in my house it's the other way. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you're exactly right. And here's what I want to say to you. Those scriptures you're quoting are perfectly congruent with the scriptures I'm quoting. Okay? And that's the beautiful irony of it. The Lord is not saying, I want you to hate your kids and ignore them. He's not saying that. He's using hyperbole to get across a really important doctrinal point. That at the center of your soul, deep in your guts, what I want for you is to be so committed to Christ and to his word that becomes the controlling idea in your life. And ultimately, it is more important than any other consideration. And he's talking to a group of people whose most important consideration is family. That's their number one thing. And he's saying, no, this has to trump that. Okay? Now, yes, certainly we should be instructing our children. But there may come a time after you're done instructing your children that your children say, not interested. Not interested. I hate this Christian stuff and I'm walking away from it. There may be times when your parents are not interested. You get saved and they're not saved. And they think you're a fool. Or your siblings think you're foolish. So what is more important to you? Cultivating good relations with those unbelievers or following hard after Christ? That's the key. That's a painful question. In my own life, I've had to leave family members behind. I've had to leave them behind. That doesn't mean I hate them. I still pray for them. I witness to them when I can. I try to teach my carnal Christians that are in my family. I try to teach them and bring them to repentance. But I'm not going to tie myself to them, and I'm not going to let them pull me down, with the wickedness. I'm going to follow hard after Christ. That's more important than anything else, or should be more important than anything else in my life, and that's what the Lord is calling us to. And by the way, when you do that, that's when you're in the best position to train up your children and to love your wife and to submit to your husband. It's the maturing, advanced believer that can fulfill all those things, because he or she has at the very center an awe for God, for His Word. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, please.
But also the times that I can think of at the moment that God required such harsh action or severing or even death was when it was so corrupt that it was like it was growing and also what would be the right word, reviling against God and exposing.
You're right on the money. You're right on the money. And just to illustrate what you just said is true. We just read an instance where 3,000 people were killed. The Levites went through hacking and slashing and killed 3,000 people. Does that shock you? Is that a shocking amount of death? No. That's a gracious amount of death. What should have happened? All of them should have been wiped out. The Lord should have said, boom, you're out of here. I'm going to work with the Hittites from now on. He should have gotten rid of the whole nation. And Moses knew that. This was grace that 3,000 people died. It was a pittance as compared to who should have died. And so, that is the point. You're right on that. They made the right stand. So it's, that's certainly, very much in line with the love and mercy of the Lord, because they were involved in gross immorality and idolatry. Now, just for the sake of saving some time, I want to skip over to Numbers 25. And this is a peculiar story. So the Moabites and the Midianites are basically trying to seduce and corrupt Israel. And so it talks about this. It says, starting in verse 1 of chapter 25 of Numbers. While Israel was staying in Shittim, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality with Moabite women, who invited them to the sacrifices of to their gods. Did you notice the connection there between sexual immorality and idolatry? Okay, very close connection. You get involved in sexual immorality, and this is true today, and your heart strays from God, and you're off. You're going to be chasing other things, and this is exactly what happened. The people ate and bowed down before these gods, so Israel joined in worshiping the Baal of Peor, and the Lord's anger burned against them. The Lord said to Moses, "Take all the leaders of these people, kill them, and expose them in broad daylight before the Lord, so that the Lord's fierce anger may turn away from Israel." So Moses said to Israel's judges, "Each of you must put to death those of your men who have joined in worshiping the Baal of Peor." Now, this is really something. What's about to happen, and I want especially for the younger folks in the room to imagine this happening right in front of you, while your elders are standing there, while the pastor of the church is standing there. Okay, this is what happens, and what might you do when this happens? Verse 6. Then an Israelite man brought to his family a Midianite woman right before the eyes of Moses and the whole assembly of Israel. Did you get that? All the leaders are standing there, the old guys that should be protecting things, right? And there you are, maybe a teenager or a young person. He brought a Midianite woman right before the eyes of Moses and the whole assembly of Israel while they were weeping at the entrance to the tent of meeting. When Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw this, he left the assembly, took a spear in his hand, and followed the Israelite into the tent. He drove the spear through both of them, through the Israelite and into the woman's body. Then the plague against the Israelites were stopped, but those who died in the plague numbered 24,000. Okay, so the picture is this. This wild and crazy party boy brings his Midianite girlfriend, and scholars debate whether they're actually going into the tabernacle or somewhere else. But I suspect that they are going into the tabernacle because of Phinehas' reaction and the Lord's response. They go into the holy place. The holy place. The holy place. To fornicate. And they do it, and Moses doesn't intervene, and Aaron doesn't intervene. Even Eleazar doesn't intervene, but young Phinehas intervenes. And he grabs a spear, he's angry, he goes into the holy place and impales these two right in the holy place. And the Lord says, that is a man who cares about my name. That's a man who's consumed with zeal for my house. And Phinehas gets blessed that day with a blessing that's going to extend into the millennial reign of Jesus Christ, the Phinehas covenant, okay? Because that's the guy who's going to inherit the priesthood, he and his descendants, because of Phinehas' act that day. So I guess my rhetorical question would be, if you're a young person here today and you saw the pastor and your parents and me and all these other old people, and we're all standing around while some gross immorality is going on in the church, do you have the guts to stand up and put your foot down and say, no, we're not going to let that happen? You know, does the Word of God mean that much to you that you would even defy your elders to defend the honor of the Lord? That's what Phinehas did. Again, a very high calling, very high calling. Verse 10, the Lord said to Moses, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, has turned my anger away from the Israelites, for he was as zealous as I am for my honor among them, so that in my zeal I did not put an end to them. Therefore tell him I am making my covenant of peace with him. Now, did you hear that? Covenant of peace? That's what's being referred to in Malachi chapter 2. When he says, I made a covenant of peace with Levi. Did he mean Levi? Levi, he's talking about the descendants of Levi. From Levi to Kohath to Amram to Moses and Aaron to Eleazar to Phinehas. That's what he's talking about. The covenant of peace was with Phinehas. He and his descendants will have a covenant of a lasting priesthood because he was zealous for the honor of his God and made atonement for the Israelites. Okay, that's what's in view there in Malachi chapter 2. Questions about any of that? Okay. So back to Malachi chapter 2, and we'll just kind of conclude this part here. So this is Malachi again, addressing the priesthood, reminding them of the high standards to which they're called, reminding them of the covenant of peace that Phinehas had. And the Lord promised, just to complete the story here, the Lord promised that Phinehas would now have a lasting covenant of priesthood. Now originally that applied to all the sons of Aaron. But those sons of Aaron kind of fell by the wayside as they went along here. What happened to the eldest son, Nadab, and the second one, Abihu? They got whacked in the holy place. Why? Yeah, because they brought strange fire, which violated shadow Christology. How does that violate shadow Christology? So what they did was, Nadab and Abihu, okay, priests, walked into the holy place, went up to the golden altar of incense, pulled out a big lighter, and lit their incense. They brought strange fire. Why would the Lord kill them for that? Yeah.
Because the fire has to be brought from the coals of the bronze altar.
Oh yeah, but that's just like a detail. Who cares? What's the big deal? Yeah, as you say, they were told as priests, they were instructed in the law, that if you want to burn incense on the golden altar of incense inside the holy place, you first go to the bronze altar, you sacrifice an animal, you take the coals from that sacrifice, you come in and you burn the incense. What? So what? That's just a little detail. What's
Your prayers to God need to go through Jesus, not through some other entity.
That's it exactly. That's the shadow Christology being taught. You do not dare to approach Yahweh Elohim in prayer apart from the atoning sacrifice of Jesus Christ. That's what that taught. And these guys said, we don't care about that. We're in a hurry. So we're just going to light the incense. And God said, oh no, you ain't. And he whacked them right there. They're dead. Nadab and Abihu, two of the most shining stars in the priesthood, in the Aaronic priesthood, get killed, leaving two other sons, Eleazar and Ithamar. Of these two, Eleazar, as you can probably deduce by now, is the shining son, the only one of the four who continues to please the Lord, he and his descendants. Ithamar turns out to be a disappointment because his descendants include some pretty nefarious bad priests. Can you name any? Who are the priests that eventually descend from Ithamar? We mentioned a couple of them early today. Notoriously bad priests. I was thinking of Eli. Eli and his sons Hophni and Phinehas. And they also had, in David's time, there was a priest that conspired against Solomon in the opening chapters of Second or First Kings there. Yeah, Abiathar. So Abiathar was also a descendant of Ithamar, and he made a really bad political decision in aligning himself with Adonijah. So he gets bounced out of the priesthood by David and Solomon.
Is that Bathsheba's father?
No. That's no. It's the same time period. Okay. Yeah, he's a priest, and he's actually sharing the high priesthood at the beginning of that story. He's sharing it with another priest who happens to be a descendant of this crowd. And who is that?
Zadok?
Huh? Yeah, Zadok. That's right, Zadok. So Zadok and Abiathar are sharing the high priesthood at the time of Solomon's accession. Abiathar allies with Adonijah against Solomon. Zadok stays loyal to Solomon. And as a result, the Phinehas covenant continues through his descendant Zadok. And God tells Zadok, he rewards Zadok in a really cool way. And how is that? When do we hear about Zadok again? You hear about his descendants in the book of Ezekiel, in the chapters where Ezekiel is describing the future millennial temple that's going to be there when Christ is ruling. And the millennial temple has a priesthood inside of it, operating inside of it, just like any temple would. And who are those priests? What are they called?
The sons of Zadok?
They're called Zadokites, the sons of Zadok. Only the descendants of Zadok will serve in the millennial temple as a continuing expression of the covenant of peace with Phinehas. Okay, so that's the idea there. And that's what's at issue in Malachi chapter 2 when he says, I made a covenant of peace with Levi. He was talking about that the deal with Phinehas. Now, last thing I want to get to then is flip over to 1 Peter 2. And, we've already made this connection, but I want to make sure we make it again. And unfortunately, this is a doctrine that is not often taught in the Scripture, strangely enough. No, it's not often taught in the church, although it's certainly there in the Scripture. 1 Peter, whoops, I'm in 2 Peter. That's why I can't find it. Okay, let's try that. Okay, 1 Peter chapter 2, and this is Peter talking to primarily the Gentile believers that he's directing himself to. And he says some shocking things to them. 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2, starting at verse 4. And he says, as you come to him, the living stone, rejected by men, but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. For in Scripture it says, see, I lay a stone in Zion, a chosen and precious cornerstone, and the one who trusts in him will never be put to shame. Now, to you who believe, this stone is precious, but to those who do not believe, the stone the builders rejected has become the capstone, and the stone that causes men to stumble, and a rock that makes them fall. I love that verse. The stone that causes men to stumble and a rock that makes them fall. A reference actually to the two advents of Christ. It says they stumble because they disobey the message, which is also what they were destined for. But you, now here he's talking to, again, the church, which includes Gentile believers. But you are a chosen people. Now that's an ironic thing to say to Gentiles, especially for a Jew like Peter to say that. Because according to Pharisaical rabbinical Judaism, what Peter should be saying is, no. We are the people. We Jews are the people. You Gentiles are the peoples, plural. You're really nobody. You don't have any significance as a nation. We are the nation. That's what rabbinical Judaism would say. But instead he says, you, all you Gentiles, black, white, red, yellow, men, women, all over the world, whatever language you're speaking, you're a chosen people, singular. You become a singular entity. A royal priesthood. Royal priesthood. A very important concept there, because what that means is we're not a Levitical priesthood. Levi has no place in ruling Israel as a king. That belongs to a different tribe. What son of Jacob had that? Judah. That's the royal tribe. Judah and Levi, they have two different functions. They don't overlap. But you're a royal priesthood, a holy nation. And by the way, the Old Testament prophets, at least one of them, foresaw this coming. He foresaw this coming. That a descendant of Judah would become a priest, or to put it in reverse, a priest would one day rule. And if you recall the vision that Zechariah had a vision of Joshua, the high priest. And the Lord told Zechariah to go make a crown. Do you remember that? That's a really cool story. He tells Zechariah, go make a crown, a royal crown. And then I want you to take that crown and I want you to put it on the head of, now who would you expect that God would say at that point? Put it on the head of who back then in Zechariah's day? Who was the obvious candidate for the crown in Zechariah's day? Well, he's actually a descendant of Judah, a descendant of David, who is right now the governor of the Persian province of Judah. Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel is there, and he's the obvious candidate for the crown because he's a son of David. But God tells Zechariah, no, take the crown and put it on the head of whom? Joshua, the high priest. Which is like, what? Yeah, because then the Lord goes on to explain, because what's going to happen is there's going to come a priest who's going to branch out and rule as king. Okay? A beautiful picture of Christ, of Christ coming. And because we are in union with Christ through the baptism of the Holy Spirit, we have a similar fate, because we've become a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging to God, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, that's rabbinical Judaism speaking. Once you were nothing, scum of the earth, garbage. But now you're the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Okay, and so the idea there is we are a royal priesthood. And if someone comes up to you, whether it's in this church or some other church, and they say, would you be interested in joining our lay ministries? Would you like to be a layman in our church? What's your answer to that?
No, thank you.
No, I can't. I don't qualify as a layman. I'm a priest. I'm not a layman. I had a guy, my old pastor in the church I used to teach, and handed me this thing one day. He goes, this is a survey of the laymen of the church. Why don't you fill this out? I gave it back to him. I said, I'm not a layman. Sorry. 1 Peter chapter 2 says I'm a royal priest. Where did this idea come from that there's this clergy, priesthood, and then the rest of us knuckleheads? Where did that come from? Yeah, it comes from Catholicism. It's Roman Catholicism, and it's as evil as can be. It is not in line with Scripture at all. The Scripture declares the entire church is a universal priesthood, and we should act like it. We should teach like it. We should declare the praises of God, just like it says in there. Declare the praises of God. All of us. We're all believers. We're all priests. We're all in the royal family. Okay, so that's why this is relevant, Malachi chapter 2. So, what are your questions, thoughts, comments on Malachi chapter 2 up to this point? Oh, you guys are tired and hungry. Hey, I didn't even have breakfast this morning, so, don't complain to me. All right. Any, yes, please.
Not directly about Malachi, there's a question that occurred to me earlier, and I didn't want to interrupt and introduce another rabbit trail, but in the Mosaic Law and the structure of temple worship and sacrifices, you have this idea of the animal taking the sins from the people. So there's a very clear idea that there's a sin issue.
Yeah.
And yet, as I've heard taught, as I understand, John the Baptist comes along and tells the people that they need to repent of their sin, and that's like a newsflash.
Yeah.
There's a disconnect there.
Yeah, there is a
How does
disconnect.
that happen?
Yeah, it's a disconnect because you have this, what you have is a confusion of the two covenants, the Abrahamic covenant on the one hand and the Mosaic covenant on the other. When you violate the Mosaic covenant, that's sin. But what a lot of the people were doing, especially the Jews, under the pressure of Hellenism and under the pressure of the Roman occupation, they developed this idea that we are separate. We got to be separate from the rest of everyone else. Well, how are we separate? Are we separate through our moral behavior? Well, they kind of looked at that and said, well, no, because we're just as right as they are. So we don't want to emphasize that. We want to emphasize something else. It's who we are as a people, by descendants, by heredity. Who are we? And what we are, we're sons of Abraham. And so they developed this idea, and Paul has to fight this all the way through the book of Romans, because the prevailing idea among rabbinical Judaism is we're special because we're the children of the patriarchs, and they had a supplementary idea that God chose the patriarchs. Why? According to rabbinical Judaism, why did he choose Abraham and Isaac and Jacob? Because they're good men, essentially, because of their virtue. And Paul has to say, no, it had nothing to do with the virtue because they weren't virtuous. That wasn't the issue. It was grace, the grace of God that designated that. And so you get this idea, it's almost a racially bigoted idea, that we're Jews, we're awesome, we're the children of Abraham, and the rest of these bums are sinners. And that's why you have Romans chapter 2 and 3, because Paul has to say, no, you are sinners too. We all are sinners. He has to keep putting that point across.
Temple worship was ongoing.
Right.
When John the Baptist is saying this, they're still
Temple worship is ongoing. How's that?
But it was.
Yeah.
Is it back to the empty?
Right.
Yeah.
It's a failure of the shadow Christology.
There's no meaning behind it.
Yeah, because by the time of Christ, you have the priesthood has completely degenerated and become political as a result of the Maccabean revolt and the Hasmonean dynasty. So anyway, it's a good question. So we'll see you next week. Have a good week. Live up to your priesthood.